Okay, so this is going to be a bit of a battle report from Ukraine over the last 24 hours. I've got something I'd like to read here from the Russian Ministry of Defense, which, if true, gives an indication of how the fighting has been proceeding over the last 24 hours. Just before I get into that, though, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the other areas of escalation around the periphery. Patrick Lancaster. If you are not aware of Patrick Lancaster, please go and check out his YouTube channel, which is Patrick Lancaster News Today. Patrick is a frontline war correspondent who has been working in the Donetsk region for a number of years now. His reporting is very, very insightful. He has just yesterday released a report from an area in Belgorod, where he's been to the Belgorod region, where there have been reports of Ukrainian shelling of the town. And what he has been reporting upon there has been that the use of Flechettes by the Ukrainian forces. Now, Flechettes are small, toothpick-sized or nail-sized pieces of steel, which are sort of cut off sheet steel or stamped out of it, put into an explosive shell, and so that when the shell is fired and detonates, it just erupts with a cloud of these razor-sharp pieces of metal. The Flechettes are banned. Are banned in conflict because they are characterized as being a type of weapon which doesn't discriminate between combatants and non-combatants. Any people or animals in the area of one of these shells exploding are just severely maimed or torn apart by the needle prick pieces of steel. So yeah, if Patrick's channel is really, really interesting. If you haven't had a look at it, go and have a look at it and check out the video, his pinned video, which is him in a trench with some Russian soldiers undergoing heavy Ukrainian shelling bombardment. The video goes for about 15 minutes in the trench, and it's just relentless, the shelling. So he's a verifiable, a legitimate frontline war correspondent, and very, very interesting. So Belgorod region, there is still shelling going on. Now, where Patrick was reporting on these shells landing, they were in residential areas, civilian areas of the town. There is also been shelling going on in another area of Belgorod, which is in the Valuiki region, where 7 people were injured. The Kursk region of Russia, also Ukrainians have started shelling into the Kursk region, into an area called Glushkovo. And in that area there, 2 people were injured, and now the Russians are now talking about developing a corridor, a safety corridor, on those areas of the Russian border, and I imagine the Belarusian border, where Russia has not yet advanced into Ukraine and claimed territory. They are talking in those areas of producing a 15 to 20 kilometre wide barrier. Now, this will be to push back any Ukrainian forces so that they're unable to then shell into the Russian townships over into the Russian border. In Belarus, there's reports that Kiev is sending large numbers of troops up towards the Belarusian border. And in Orehkhov, there's heavy fighting going on. So I'll just move now. I want to talk a little bit about the Russian Ministry of Defense report for the 19th of June. So this is where the Ministry of Defense provide an update from the areas of where all their forces are fighting. And I want to read through this. So 19th of June 2023, the Russian Defense Ministry report on the progress of the special military operation. The Russian Armed Forces launched a long-range sea-based high-precision weapons group strike against foreign-manufactured military hardware storage sites. So the Russians here, it seems that they have used the Black Sea Fleet and using those naval forces with some of their large anti-tank missiles, have used them to fire upon ammunition dumps, it sounds like, foreign manufactured military hardware storage sites. So these will be ammunition dumps or sites, marshalling areas for the offensive where they're storing foreign supplied vehicles, tanks, armoured vehicles, self-propelled howitzers and that type of thing. The reporting from the Ministry of Defence was that all of the assigned targets have been neutralised. Moving on, during the day, the most active Ukrainian armed forces offensive attempts were in South Donetsk and Donetsk directions. In South Donetsk direction, as a result of the competency and self-sacrificing actions of the Vostok group of forces, the ministry reports, the aviation and artillery, 3 attacks by the Ukrainian combined units have been repelled close to the Vremevka salient. The enemy losses in this area were 1 tank, 12 armoured fighting vehicles, as well as 1 foreign manufactured combat engineer vehicle. In addition, 2 enemy attacks have been repelled, during which 2 tanks, 10 infantry fighting vehicles and 2 armoured fighting vehicles have been hit near Novaya Tavozhanka. This is in the Zaporozhye region, which is where some of the very heavy fighting is going on. This is just sort of southwest of Orehkhov and of and just slightly northeast of Tokmak area. This is the area where there has been, just north of this area, fighting going on since the start of the offensive, and there have been some very small gains by the Ukrainians. Little townships like Novoskuchne, and these are where there has been reports of some very, very heavy losses suffered by the Ukrainians as they have moved into some of these townships and then been shelled by the Russians. The reporting today of the fighting in this area, of the Malaya Tokmachka area, the enemy losses were over 100 Ukrainian servicemen, 3 tanks, 10 infantry fighting vehicles, 14 armoured fighting vehicles, 4 motor vehicles, 2 Gvozdika self-propelled artillery systems, a D-20, an MSTA-B and D-30 howitzers. In the Donetsk region, it goes on, the active actions of the Yug group of forces have successfully repelled 4 enemy attacks close to Pervomaevskoye, Petrovskoye, and Staro-Mikhailovka in Donetsk People's Republic. The enemy losses were over 340 Ukrainian servicemen, 2 armoured fighting vehicles, 5 motor vehicles, 1 Polish-manufactured Krab self-propelled artillery system, as well as D-20 and MSTA-B howitzers. 1 ordnance depot of the Armed Forces of Ukraine's 5th Assault Brigade has been destroyed near Ivanovsky in the Donetsk People's Republic. The reporting continues into the Kupiansk region. So in the Kupiansk region, as a result of the strikes launched by Army Aviation, Artillery and the units of the Zapad groups of forces, the actions of 2 Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance groups has been prevented close to Timkovka in the Kharkov region. The enemy losses here were reported up to 45 Ukrainian servicemen, 3 armoured fighting vehicles, 4 motor vehicles, and 1 Polish-manufactured Krab self-propelled artillery system. Now, I just want to stop here for a moment and just talk about some of the reporting which has been coming out in the last day or so from Russian commanders on some of the Telegram channels, where reportedly some of these commanders are stating that they have not witnessed losses in men and manpower of these levels before. I believe in some of these regions, what is being used by the Russians in some of the shelling is actually some of the TOS-1 or the flamethrower units. Now, these TOS-1 units are tank-mounted multiple rocket launch systems. They can hold up to 30 rockets, and these rockets can, when fired, can support the thermobaric warheads. So these thermobaric warheads are a warhead which is filled completely with fuel, almost completely with fuel, such that when they explode, they then consume oxygen in the surrounding air, and the fuel is dispersed, forming a large fireball. These thermobaric weapons, if you've seen video of them, they're devastating to see them, the shockwave they generate, and the massive volume of which they form around the explosion. They are apparently very effective against entrenched areas, heavily entrenched areas, and even in buildings where there are people, forces in buildings. Because unlike a normal shell, which will hit and they will explode within its region with shrapnel and a blast area, the gas fuel mix nature of the thermobaric weapons allows that to flow into trenches and enclosed areas and then explode within there as well. The reports of some of these commanders are terrible, and they are talking about the fact that they are finding it difficult to calculate the number of Ukrainian losses when they've gone into these areas after the fighting has stopped and they've sent scouts in. My interpretation of that is that the damage to these men, to their bodies, is so bad that it's difficult to count accurately how many people have actually been killed in these thermobaric explosions. And as we can see from this reporting, in these different areas, the numbers just in the last day are high, with over 340 in one area, 45 in another, 120 in another area. And this is just in a few areas of conflict. Continuing on with the Ministry of Defence's report, in the Krasny Liman direction, aviation and artillery of the Center Group of Forces have hit enemy units near Kuzmino and Makivka in the Lugansk People's Republic. The activities of 3 Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance groups have been disrupted close to Yampolovka, which is in the Donetsk People's Republic, Chervonaya, Dibrova, and Kremenaya in the Lugansk People's Republic. I apologize for my butchering of these Ukrainian names. It's something that will improve with practice. The enemy losses in this area were up to 105 Ukrainian servicemen, 2 infantry fighting vehicles, 2 armoured fighting vehicles, 2 pickup trucks, 2 Gvozdika self-propelled artillery systems, as well as D-20 and D-30 howitzers. In moving to the Kherson region, the enemy losses were over 40 Ukrainian servicemen, 4 motor vehicles, and 1 US-manufactured M777 artillery system. The operational, tactical and army aviation, missile troops and artillery of the armed forces of the Russian Federation have neutralized 93 Ukrainian armed forced artillery units at their firing positions, their manpower and hardware in 102 areas. 2 artillery depots have been hit. And for the 65th Mechanized Brigade close to Zaporozhye, and another artillery ammunition depot in that area. Air defense facilities have shot down 1 Mi-8 helicopter of the Ukrainian Air Force near Orehkhov in the Zaporozhye region, and 5 HIMARS multiple launch rocket system projectiles have also been intercepted. Here, my understanding here is that this is not to say that 5 HIMARS rocket launch systems have been destroyed, but that 5 HIMARS missiles have been intercepted. In addition, 14 Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles have been shot down through these regions. And then the Ministry of Defence then completes today's update with a summary, not of just the last 2 days, but a summary of the reported Ukrainian losses for the entire special military operation to date. And so these are some of the numbers that the Ministry of Defence is reporting. In total, 444 airplanes, 240 helicopters, 4,700 unmanned aerial vehicles, 426 air defense missile systems have been destroyed. 10,192 tanks and other armoured fighting vehicles destroyed. 1,125 fighting vehicles equipped with MLRS, multiple launch rocket systems, so over 1,000 of the multiple launch rocket systems destroyed. 5,163 field artillery, cannons and mortars, as well as 11,047 special military motor vehicles have been destroyed by the combined Russian forces of the Ukrainian forces during the special military operation. Now, these numbers, obviously coming from a Russian site, the Ministry of Defense, take them with as much skepticism as you feel is appropriate. However, these numbers, which are large, 444 aeroplanes, 240 helicopters, 10,000 tanks, some people will scoff and say, look, Ukraine has never had that many tanks. But we need to consider the fact that the Ukraine has been arming itself for this conflict since 2014. Since 2014, American private and British private military companies have been in Ukraine training the Ukrainian army and military. They've been supplied with training outside of the Ukraine. They've had equipment provided to them and training on NATO equipment during that period of time. And then, so there's that 10-year period to build their resources and stocks. There's also been, in the last year, over $150 billion of military aid given to Ukraine by the West. Now, a large percentage of that $150 billion has been in the form of military equipment, tanks, mobile artillery, mortars, drones, air defense systems. So while these numbers may not be exactly accurate, given the large starting numbers that Ukraine had of this equipment and what it's been provided over the last year and continues to receive, then these numbers may at least give us some indication of the scale of the conflict. And now, this is not to say that the Russians haven't suffered. Of course they have, but the Ministry of Defense isn't reporting those numbers here. But if these numbers are accurate, we do get a feeling for just how intense the fighting has been. Also, I'd just like to talk a little bit about a couple of reports that I've read and some of the videos I've seen in the last couple of days relating to Ukrainian prisoners of war, where a number of them have... Now, here I must state, these are prisoners of war. So we don't know in what frame of mind they are, in what state they are. We don't know exactly how heavily they may be being coerced by the Russians to make these statements or not. But some of the statements that they're making and being released on social media are quite saddening, really. One young Ukrainian in his talk to camera, which was on social media, he describes how he was so psychologically damaged by the fighting, and that he had decided to go and seek out Russians to capture him so that he could stop fighting and so that he just wouldn't be killed. He said he had reached the point where he just didn't care that there might be mines where he needed to walk. He was just going to seek out some Russians to capture him. Fortunately for him, he did manage to miss mines or being shot or anything like that, and has been captured and may at some stage be returned to Ukraine as part of a prisoner of war swap. Other reports and videos I've seen this week of large groups of, by large groups, I'm saying here probably 20, 25 Ukrainian soldiers walking, carrying their wounded, and of the 25 of them swearing and berating their commanders for treating them as just meat and cannon fodder and sending them into a situation where they had no hope of surviving, and them stating that all the people you could see there, that 25, that's all that was left of their company or whatever it was that had gone into fight. So really terrible terrible footage. Now, again, take it with the skepticism that you think is appropriate, because yes, these are prisoners of war. Yes, they were being filmed by Russians. So we don't know how heavily they were coerced into saying this. Although I must say, the group of them walking along carrying their wounded, it seemed quite genuine, their response and their anger at the commanders and their being upset that this was all that remained of their troops. Okay, so that's the battle update for today. I'll be back with one tomorrow. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this. Talk to you soon.